The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hayes Global Industries' 47th floor boardroom with such violence that it sounded like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Amara Clark stood frozen in the doorway, her worn canvas bag clutched against her chest, her breath catching in her throat as 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her, with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. The manila folder she'd been sent to retrieve, Jonathan's forgotten merger documents, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her trembling hands. She shouldn't be here. Not in this room where decisions worth billions were made, where men in suits that cost more than her annual salary decided the fates of thousands. The scent of expensive cologne and leather mixed with the faint aroma of imported coffee, creating an atmosphere so thick with power and privilege that Amara felt it pressing against her skin like a physical force. Her second-hand blouse, carefully ironed that morning, suddenly felt paper-thin and inadequate. The small stain near the hem, grape juice from Emma's breakfast, seemed to glow like a beacon announcing her otherness. "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry, I just need to," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, already backing toward the door. "Stop!" Jonathan Hayes's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. He stood at the far end of the massive mahogany table, his 6'3" frame rigid, his jaw set in a way that Amara had only seen once before, 6 months ago, in the darkness of that warehouse, when he'd looked at her with eyes that held both terror and desperate hope. "Don't move, Amara." The room fell into a silence so complete that Amara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She watched as Jonathan's knuckles whitened where they gripped the back of the leather chair at the head of the table, the chairman's seat, the throne of Hayes Global Industries, a position that commanded respect from Fortune 500 CEOs and world leaders alike. "Jonathan, we have 17 minutes before the Hong Kong market opens," said Marcus Whitmore, the chief financial officer, his voice tight with barely concealed irritation. His Rolex caught the light as he tapped his finger against the table in a rhythm that spoke of impatience and privilege. "The Zhao Corporation is waiting for our counteroffer. Every second we delay costs us leverage." "Then they can wait 17 more minutes," Jonathan replied, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "Or 17 hours or 17 days, I don't particularly care." Amara felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. In the 6 months she'd worked for the Hayes family, caring for 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Lucas, she'd learned to read Jonathan's moods with the precision of a meteorologist reading storm patterns. This wasn't anger, this was something else entirely. Something that made her skin prickle with a warning she couldn't quite name. "Sir, I really should just..." She tried again, gesturing weakly toward the door with the folder. "Sit down, Amara." Jonathan's voice was softer now, but it carried a weight that made it impossible to disobey. He gestured to the chair at the head of the table, his chair the seat of ultimate authority. "Please." The please broke something in her chest. She'd heard him use that word exactly 3 times in 6 months. Once when Emma had been sick with fever, and he'd begged Amara to stay through the night. Once when Lucas had his nightmare about the bad men and wouldn't let anyone else hold him. And once in that warehouse, when everything had gone to hell, and he'd whispered it like a prayer. "Please don't let them hurt my children." "Jonathan, this is highly inappropriate," said Catherine Vance, the senior vice president of operations, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her tablet. Her voice dripped with the kind of disdain that came from old money and older prejudices. "We have board protocols. This woman is domestic staff. She has no business." "This woman," Jonathan interrupted, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze nitrogen, "has more business in this room than half the people sitting at this table. And if anyone has a problem with that, there's the door. Your resignation will be processed by end of business today." Amara's legs felt like they might give out. The folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the pristine marble floor like autumn leaves. She bent to gather them, her hands shaking so badly that she could barely grasp the pages. This was a nightmare. This had to be a nightmare. She'd wake up in her small apartment in Queens, in her narrow bed with the springs that squeaked, and this would all be some anxiety-induced fever dream. But Jonathan was already moving. He crossed the room with long strides, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor with purpose and finality. He bent down beside her, his expensive suit jacket pulling tight across his shoulders as he helped gather the scattered documents. His hand brushed against hers, and she felt the tremor in his fingers, the same tremor she'd felt 6 months ago when she'd cut the zip ties from his wrists in the darkness. "I need you to trust me," he said quietly, so only she could hear. His blue eyes, the same shade as Lucas's, held something that looked like desperation mixed with determination. Like I trusted you. Can you do that? The memory hit her like a physical blow. The warehouse, the smell of rust and fear, Emma's muffled sobs, Lucas's small body pressed against her side, the cold metal of the gun against her spine, the choice she'd had to make in a split second, the choice that had cost her everything and saved everything simultaneously. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Jonathan stood, extending his hand to help her up. When she took it, his grip was firm, anchoring. He led her to the head of the table, to that massive leather chair that probably cost more than her car. The executives watched with expressions ranging from shock to fury to confusion. Marcus Whitmore's face had gone an alarming shade of red. Catherine Vance looked like she'd swallowed something toxic. "Sit," Jonathan said again, and this time it wasn't a request. Amara sat. The leather was butter soft, still warm from where Jonathan had been standing behind it. The chair seemed to swallow her small frame. From this position, she could see everything. The entire boardroom, the wall of windows revealing Manhattan's glittering skyline, the faces of people who wielded more power before breakfast than most people encountered in a lifetime. She felt exposed, vulnerable like a rabbit that had wandered into a den of wolves. Jonathan moved to stand beside her, his hand resting on the back of the chair. "Before we discuss the Zhao merger, before we talk about quarterly projections or market positioning or any of the business that brought you here today, I need to tell you all a story. And you're going to listen to every single word, because this story is the only reason any of us are sitting in this room right now, instead of attending my funeral and fighting over my estate." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, questions fired like bullets, objections raised with the indignation of people unused to being told what to do. But Jonathan simply raised his hand, and somehow, impossibly, they all fell silent. That was power, Amara realized. Not the kind that came from money or position, but the kind that came from absolute certainty. 6 months ago, Jonathan began, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of something raw and unhealed. "I made a mistake that nearly cost me everything that matters. I trusted the wrong people. I ignored warnings. I prioritized a business deal over my family's safety. And because of that, my children, my 7-year-old daughter and my 5-year-old son, were taken from their school by men with guns." Amara's hands gripped the armrests of the chair. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, could taste copper in her mouth from where she'd bitten her lip. She didn't want to relive this. She'd spent 6 months trying to forget, trying to bury it under the routine of normal days and ordinary moments. But Jonathan was pulling it all back up, dragging it into the light. "The kidnappers were professionals," Jonathan continued. "They knew my schedule, my security protocols, my weaknesses. They knew exactly when to strike and how to disappear. They took Emma and Lucas from their private school at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. By 3:15, I had received a video on my phone showing my children bound and terrified in the back of a van. The ransom demand was $50 million, and the complete destruction of evidence I'd gathered about a certain business partner's illegal activities. Catherine Vance had gone pale. Marcus Whitmore's fingers had stopped their tapping. Around the table, the executives sat frozen, their previous irritation replaced by something that looked like dawning horror. "I called the FBI," Jonathan said. "I called my head of security. I called everyone I could think of. And they all told me the same thing. Pay the ransom, destroy the evidence, and pray that the kidnappers kept their word. They told me that any attempt at rescue would likely result in my children's deaths. They told me that men like these, organized, connected, ruthless, didn't leave loose ends." Amara closed her eyes. She could still hear Emma's voice, small and terrified, calling for her daddy. She could still feel Lucas's small hand clutching hers in the darkness. "What none of them knew," Jonathan said, and now his hand moved from the chair to rest on Amara's shoulder, "was that my children's nanny had insisted on going with them that day. Emma had been anxious about a school presentation. Lucas had been having nightmares. Amara had asked if she could accompany them just to provide extra support. I almost said no. I almost told her it wasn't necessary, that the school had plenty of staff, that she should take the afternoon off." His fingers tightened on her shoulder, and Amara could feel him trembling. "Thank God I didn't." The rain continued its assault on the windows, but inside the boardroom, the silence was absolute. 23 people barely breathing, waiting for the rest of the story that would explain why a nanny was sitting in the chairman's seat. "When the kidnappers took my children," Jonathan said, his voice dropping lower. They took Amara too. They didn't plan to. She wasn't part of their calculation. But she was there and she was a witness. So they grabbed her along with Emma and Lucas. They threw all three of them in the back of a van and drove them to a warehouse in Red Hook. And that's where everything changed. Amara felt tears burning behind her closed eyelids. She didn't want to remember, but Jonathan's voice was pulling her back, dragging her into that warehouse, into that moment when everything she'd tried to leave behind came roaring back to life. The kidnappers made their demands. They sent their videos. They gave me 12 hours to comply. And during those 12 hours, while the FBI was setting up their command center and my security team was trying to trace the location and I was preparing to give these animals everything they wanted, Amara was in that warehouse with my children, keeping them calm, keeping them quiet, keeping them alive. Jonathan's voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, there was steel in it. What the kidnappers didn't know, what I didn't know until much later, was that Amara Clark isn't just a nanny. She wasn't always someone who read bedtime stories and made peanut butter sandwiches and braided little girls' hair. Before she came to work for my family, before she answered my job posting and showed up at my door with references and a warm smile and a gentleness that my children desperately needed after their mother died, Amara had a very different life. Amara opened her eyes. She could feel everyone staring at her, could feel their confusion and curiosity and disbelief. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here, in this chair, in this moment, with her past being laid bare in front of strangers who would judge her, who would see her differently, who would never understand. Amara, Jonathan said softly, tell them what you did before you became a nanny. She couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Her throat had closed up. Her tongue felt thick and useless. She shook her head mutely. Then I'll tell them, Jonathan said. Amara Clark spent 8 years as a covert intelligence operative for the Defense Intelligence Agency. She specialized in hostage rescue and counter-terrorism. She operated in 17 countries under 6 different identities. She has training in tactical combat, psychological warfare, surveillance, and crisis negotiation. She's fluent in 5 languages. She's been shot twice, stabbed once, and has more commendations in her classified file than most decorated generals. The room exploded again, but this time with a different energy. Shock, disbelief. Catherine Vance actually laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. That's absurd. You expect us to believe that this woman is some kind of secret agent? Jonathan, I understand you're grateful to your employee, but this is... I have the documents, Jonathan said flatly, declassified at my request through channels that cost me 7 favors and a significant donation to a senator's re-election campaign. I can provide them if you'd like to see proof, but I'd rather finish the story first. He looked down at Amara, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest ache. Gratitude, yes, but also guilt and grief and a desperate need for her to understand that this wasn't cruelty, this exposure. This was something else, something necessary. In that warehouse, Jonathan continued, while I was gathering ransom money and preparing to destroy evidence that would have sent powerful people to prison, Amara was assessing the situation. She counted the kidnappers, 5 men, all armed. She identified their weapons, 2 Glocks, 2 AR-15s, 1 shotgun. She noted their positions, their patterns, their weaknesses. She kept my children calm by telling them stories, by singing to them, by promising them that everything would be okay. And she waited for her moment. Amara could see it all again. The warehouse's corrugated metal walls, the single bare bulb swinging overhead, the smell of motor oil and mildew. Emma pressed against her left side, Lucas against her right, both of them trying so hard to be brave. The kidnappers arguing about something in the corner, their voices rising and falling. The moment when one of them walked too close, when his attention drifted, when the universe aligned and gave her a 3-second window. At 11:47 p.m., Jonathan said, approximately 9 hours after the kidnapping, Amara made her move. She disabled the first kidnapper with a strike to the throat that crushed his larynx. She took his weapon, a Glock 19, and used it to shoot the second kidnapper in the shoulder before he could raise his AR-15. The third kidnapper managed to fire twice, but Amara had already moved, putting herself between the bullets and my children. She returned fire, hitting him in the chest. The fourth kidnapper ran. The fifth tried to use Emma as a shield. Jonathan's voice went very quiet. That one Amara killed with a headshot from 17 feet away, while my daughter was in his arms. The bullet passed within 2 inches of Emma's ear. If Amara's hand had trembled even slightly, If her aim had been off by even a fraction, my daughter would be dead. The silence in the room was no longer just attentive. It was reverent, horrified, awed. By the time the FBI traced the location and arrived at the warehouse, Jonathan said, it was over. Amara had secured the perimeter, administered first aid to the 2 surviving kidnappers, and was sitting on the floor with my children in her arms, singing them the same lullaby she'd been singing when they were taken. Emma had stopped crying. Lucas had fallen asleep, and Amara was covered in blood, some of it hers, most of it not, and she looked up at me when I came through that door, like she was afraid I would fire her for making a mess. A sound escaped Amara's throat, something between a laugh and a sob. She remembered that moment, remembered Jonathan's face, white as paper, his eyes wild, remembered thinking that she'd failed, that she'd traumatized his children, that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. I asked her why, Jonathan said, why she'd risked everything, why she'd revealed her past, why she'd put herself in danger when she could have just waited for the ransom to be paid. Do you know what she said? He looked around the room, making eye contact with each executive in turn. She said, because they're my kids too, and nobody hurts my kids. Amara felt the tears spill over, hot and shameful. She'd spent 6 months trying to be normal, trying to be just the nanny, trying to pretend that night hadn't happened. But it had happened, and it had changed everything. After that night, Jonathan said, I tried to give Amara a bonus. She refused. I tried to give her a raise. She refused. I tried to give her anything, a new car, a better apartment, a college fund, anything, and she refused it all. She said she was just doing her job. She said that keeping Emma and Lucas safe was what I paid her for, and she didn't need extra compensation for doing what she was supposed to do. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. For 6 months, I've watched this woman make my children breakfast, help them with homework, take them to the park, read them stories, tuck them in at night. For 6 months, I've watched her be gentle and patient and kind, and I've known that this same woman killed 3 men to protect my family and would do it again without hesitation. And I've wondered how to repay a debt that can never be repaid. Jonathan moved then, walking around the table until he stood in front of Amara. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document, multiple pages bound with a blue backing, official looking and heavy with significance. This morning, he said, I finalized something I've been working on for months. Amara, you're going to want to refuse this too. You're going to tell me it's too much, that you don't deserve it, that you're just the nanny. But I need you to understand something. He knelt down in front of her chair, this billionaire CEO, this man who commanded empires, getting on his knees in front of his children's nanny, while his board of directors watched in stunned silence. You're not just the nanny, he said. You're the reason my children still have a father. You're the reason I still have my children. You're the reason this company still has a CEO, and these people still have their jobs, and the thousands of employees of Hayes Global Industries still have their livelihoods. Everything exists because you made an impossible shot in a warehouse 6 months ago. And I will not let you disappear back into anonymity. I will not let you pretend that what you did was ordinary. I will not let the world forget that you are extraordinary. He held out the document. This is a contract. It transfers 30% of my personal shares in Hayes Global Industries to you, effective immediately. It also creates a new position, Director of Corporate Security and Family Protection, with a salary of $2 million annually, full benefits, and complete operational authority over all security matters related to this company and my family. You will report directly to me and to no one else. Your decisions will be final. Your authority will be absolute. Amara stared at the document like it was a live snake. Jonathan, I can't. You can, he said firmly. And you will, because I'm not asking you as your employer. I'm asking you as a father who owes you his children's lives. I'm asking you as a man who has spent 6 months trying to figure out how to say thank you and finally realized that thank you will never be enough. So instead, I'm giving you power. I'm giving you resources. I'm giving you the ability to do for other families what you did for mine. He stood up, still holding the document out to her. There are other families out there, Amara, other children who need protection, other parents who are vulnerable, other situations where someone with your skills and your heart could make the difference between tragedy and survival. I'm giving you the means to do that. And I'm doing it in front of these witnesses, so that everyone in this room understands that you are not staff. You are not an employee in the traditional sense. You are a partner. You are family. and anyone who treats you as anything less will answer to me." The rain had stopped. Amara hadn't noticed when, but the windows were clear now, revealing a sky that was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. She looked at the document in Jonathan's hands, at the faces around the table, some shocked, some calculating, some genuinely moved. She looked at Jonathan, at this man who had trusted her with his most precious treasures and was now trusting her with even more. And she thought about Emma, who still had nightmares sometimes but who smiled more every day. She thought about Lucas, who had started calling her Mara instead of Miss Clark, and who held her hand when they crossed the street. She thought about all the other Emmas and Lucases out there, all the other children who might need someone to stand between them and the darkness. "If I take this," she said slowly, her voice rough with emotion, "I have conditions." Jonathan's face broke into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. "Name them." "I still make breakfast for Emma and Lucas. I still read them bedtime stories. I still braid Emma's hair and help Lucas with his math homework. That doesn't change. They're still my kids and I'm still their nanny, no matter what my job title says." "Done," Jonathan said immediately. "And I want to create a foundation," Amara continued, her voice growing stronger, "for families who've been through trauma, for children who've lost parents, for people who need protection but can't afford it. I want to use these resources to help people who have nowhere else to turn." "Done," Jonathan said again. "I'll match whatever funding you need, dollar for dollar." Amara took the document. Her hands were steady now, the trembling gone. She looked at the signatures, at the legal language that would change her life forever, at the weight of responsibility and opportunity that came with it. "There's one more thing," she said, looking up at Jonathan. "That business partner you mentioned, the one whose illegal activities you had evidence about, the one who was connected to the kidnapping. What happened to him?" Jonathan's smile turned cold. "That's actually the second reason I wanted you in this room today. Marcus, would you care to explain?" Marcus Whitmore had been silent for so long that everyone had almost forgotten he was there. Now, as attention turned to him, his face went from red to white to grey in the space of a heartbeat. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice shook. "Don't you?" Jonathan's voice was silk over steel. "Amara, when you were in that warehouse, you said something to me later that I didn't fully understand at the time. You said that one of the kidnappers made a phone call and you heard him say a name. Do you remember what name that was?" Amara's eyes locked on Marcus Whitmore, and she saw the exact moment he realized he was caught. He said, "Whitmore." He said, "Whitmore wants proof they're scared. Whitmore wants the evidence destroyed. Whitmore says no loose ends." The room erupted into chaos. Executives pushed back from the table, some moving away from Marcus, others shouting questions. Catherine Vance looked like she might faint, but Jonathan simply stood there, calm and certain, while security guards entered the room, guards that Amara hadn't noticed positioning themselves by the doors during the story. "Marcus Whitmore," Jonathan said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are terminated effective immediately. These security officers will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings, and then you will be escorted from the building. The FBI has been investigating you for the past 6 months, and they have enough evidence to charge you with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, attempted murder, and about 17 other felonies. I'm told they'll be waiting for you in the lobby." Marcus lunged across the table, his face contorted with rage, reaching for Jonathan. But Amara was faster. She was out of the chair and moving before anyone else could react, intercepting Marcus mid-lunge, redirecting his momentum, and putting him face down on the table with his arm twisted behind his back in a hold that made him cry out in pain. "Don't," she said quietly, her mouth close to his ear. "Don't make me hurt you in front of all these people. It would be embarrassing for both of us." The security guards moved in, taking custody of Marcus and hauling him out of the room. His protests and threats echoed down the hallway, fading into silence. The remaining executives sat frozen, processing what they'd just witnessed. Jonathan straightened his tie and returned to his position at the head of the table, except now Amara was in his chair and he stood beside her, his hand once again resting on her shoulder. "Now," he said pleasantly, as if nothing unusual had happened, "shall we discuss the Zhao Corporation merger? I believe we have a counter-offer to prepare, and I'd very much like to hear Amara's thoughts on the security implications of expanding our operations into Southeast Asia. She has extensive experience in that region, and I trust her judgment implicitly." For a moment, no one moved. Then Catherine Vance, of all people, opened her laptop and pulled up a presentation. "Of course," she said, her voice only slightly shaky. "Miss Clark, if you'll look at slide 7, you'll see our current security assessment for the proposed facilities in Vietnam and Thailand. I'd be very interested in your professional opinion." And just like that, the meeting continued. Amara found herself analyzing security protocols, identifying vulnerabilities, suggesting improvements. The executives listened to her with a respect that had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with the fact that she'd just taken down their CFO with one hand while barely breaking a sweat. As the sun rose fully over Manhattan, painting the boardroom in shades of gold and amber, Amara realized something profound. For 8 years, she'd been an operative, living in shadows, becoming whoever she needed to be, sacrificing pieces of herself for missions that she could never talk about. Then she'd lost everything, her team, her partner, her sense of purpose, and she'd walked away thinking that becoming a nanny was a retreat, a surrender, a way to hide from the world. But she'd been wrong. Taking care of Emma and Lucas hadn't been hiding, it had been healing, and now impossibly she had a chance to combine both parts of herself, the warrior and the caregiver, the protector and the nurturer. She could keep Emma and Lucas safe while also building something that would keep other children safe. She could use her skills not to destroy, but to preserve, not to take lives, but to save them. "Amara," Jonathan's voice pulled her back to the present. "You okay?" She looked up at him, at this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and her most dangerous, who had trusted her with everything that mattered to him, and who was now giving her the tools to matter even more. "Yeah," she said, and for the first time in 6 months she meant it completely. "I'm okay." The meeting continued. Outside, Manhattan woke up to another day, millions of people starting their routines, unaware that in a boardroom on the 47th floor, a nanny had just become something more. Not because she'd stopped being a nanny, she would never stop being that, but because someone had finally seen her for everything she was and everything she could be. And in a brownstone across town, Emma and Lucas were waking up wondering where Mara was, not knowing yet that their nanny had just become one of the most powerful people in corporate America. Not knowing that the woman who made their breakfast and braided Emma's hair and helped Lucas with his nightmares was also the woman who had killed to protect them and would build an empire to ensure no other child would ever have to be as scared as they had been. But they would know. Eventually, when they were older, Jonathan would tell them the whole story, and they would understand that the greatest gift their father ever gave them wasn't his wealth or his name or his legacy. It was Amara, just Amara, who was never just anything. The weeks following that boardroom revelation moved with a velocity that left Amara breathless. One moment she was sitting in that chairman's seat, her past laid bare before strangers who had become reluctant allies, and the next, she was standing in an office 3 floors above the boardroom, her office, staring at a nameplate that read, "Amara Clark, Director of Corporate Security and Family Protection," in letters that seemed to mock her with their permanence. The office was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Hudson River that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. A desk made of some exotic wood she couldn't identify. Leather furniture that whispered wealth with every creak. Computer systems with security clearances that rivaled what she'd had access to during her DIA days. And in the corner, almost hidden behind a potted plant that someone had placed there to soften the corporate sterility, a small bookshelf containing every children's book she'd ever read to Emma and Lucas. That bookshelf broke her heart a little. It was so perfectly Jonathan, giving her power and position while making sure she remembered what mattered most. "You hate it." Jonathan's voice came from the doorway, and Amara turned to find him leaning against the frame, his tie loosened, his jacket discarded somewhere, looking more human than he had any right to look after the chaos of the past few weeks. "I don't hate it," Amara said carefully. "It's just, a lot. You can change anything you want. Furniture, layout, color scheme. Hell, you can knock down walls if you want to. This is your space, Amara. Make it yours." She walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. From this height, the people on the street below looked like ants, insignificant and small. She'd spent most of her life being one of those ants. Invisible, unremarkable, deliberately forgettable. The idea of being up here, visible and significant, made her skin crawl with discomfort. "How are Emma and Lucas handling it?" she asked, changing the subject because she couldn't bear to talk about herself anymore. Jonathan's expression softened immediately, the way it always did when someone mentioned his children. Emma thinks you're a superhero now. She's been telling everyone at school that her nanny is secretly a spy. Lucas is confused about why you're not home as much, but he's managing. They both miss you. I miss them too. The words came out rougher than she intended. I still make them breakfast every morning. I still read to them at night. But it's not the same, is it? I'm not just their nanny anymore. I'm something else, and they can feel the difference. They're adapting, Jonathan said gently. Kids are resilient, and you're still you, Amara. A title doesn't change that. But it did change things. Everything had changed. In the 3 weeks since that board meeting, Amara had been thrust into a world she'd spent years avoiding. She'd sat through security briefings that revealed just how vulnerable Hayes Global Industries had been, and still was. She'd reviewed personnel files on every employee with access to sensitive information, looking for the red flags that should have been caught months or years ago. She'd interviewed the heads of every department, watching their body language, listening for the tells that separated honest people from those with hidden agendas. And she'd discovered that Marcus Whitmore hadn't been working alone. We need to talk about Catherine Vance, Amara said, turning away from the window to face Jonathan directly. And about the Zhao Corporation merger. Jonathan's jaw tightened. You found something? I found a lot of things. Amara moved to her desk, pulling up files on one of the multiple monitors that had been installed. Catherine's been with Hayes Global for 12 years. Impeccable record. Stellar performance reviews. Promoted to Senior VP 5 years ago. On paper, she's exactly what she appears to be. A brilliant executive who's helped grow this company's international presence. But, Jonathan prompted, moving to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder. But her financial records tell a different story. In the past 18 months, she's made 7 trips to Hong Kong that weren't on any official company itinerary. She's received wire transfers totaling $3 million from shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, and her personal phone, which she thinks is secure, has been in regular contact with someone very interesting. Amara pulled up a photo on the screen. An older Asian man, distinguished looking, wearing an expensive suit. Do you recognize him? Jonathan's face went pale. That's David Zhao, CEO of Zhao Corporation, the company we're supposed to be merging with. Not just merging with, Amara corrected. According to the terms Catherine negotiated, Hayes Global would be acquiring Zhao Corporation's manufacturing facilities in Southeast Asia. You'd be taking on their infrastructure, their workforce, their supply chains. It's being presented as an expansion opportunity, access to cheaper labor, reduced production costs, increased profit margins. But it's not, Jonathan said flatly. It's not, Amara confirmed. Zhao Corporation is drowning in debt. They have environmental violations pending in 3 countries. Their facilities are outdated and dangerous. Their workforce is exploited to the point where international labor organizations are preparing lawsuits, and their supply chains are contaminated with materials sourced from conflict zones. If Hayes Global acquires them, you don't just take on their assets, you take on their liabilities, all of them. Jonathan's hand came down on the desk hard enough to rattle the monitors. Catherine knew this. She had to have known this. She knew, Amara said, and she was paid very well to make sure you didn't. The merger would have destroyed Hayes Global within 2 years. Lawsuits, fines, criminal investigations, stock collapse, all of it. And when the dust settled, Zhao Corporation's creditors would have picked apart the remains, and Catherine would have walked away with her payoff and a new job somewhere far from the wreckage. Jesus Christ. Jonathan ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment he looked every one of his 42 years. Marcus tried to have my children killed, and Catherine was planning to kill my company. How did I miss this? How did I not see what was happening right in front of me? Because you're not a paranoid intelligence operative, Amara said quietly. You're a businessman who wants to believe the best of people. You're a father who was grieving his wife and trying to hold his family together. You're human, Jonathan, and they exploited that humanity. What do we do? Jonathan asked, and there was something in his voice that made Amara's chest ache. A vulnerability, a trust, a willingness to let her lead. We set a trap, Amara said, and we make sure that when it closes we catch everyone involved. Over the next week, Amara orchestrated something beautiful and brutal. She let Catherine believe the merger was proceeding as planned. She arranged meetings, approved budgets, signed off on logistics. She played the role of the new security director who was still learning the ropes, asking naive questions and accepting Catherine's smooth explanations with apparent gratitude. But behind the scenes, she was building a case that would stand up in any court in the world. She traced every wire transfer, documented every secret meeting, recorded every phone call. She worked with FBI agents who had been investigating the Zhao Corporation for years and were thrilled to finally have an inside source. She coordinated with international law enforcement agencies in 5 countries, building a web that would catch not just Catherine and David Zhao, but the entire network of corruption that had been using Hays Global as a vehicle for money laundering and fraud. And through it all, she made breakfast for Emma and Lucas. She braided Emma's hair. She helped Lucas with his math homework. She read them stories at night about heroes and villains and the thin line between courage and recklessness. "Mara?" Emma asked one night, her small hand playing with the edge of her blanket, in that way she did when she was working up the courage to ask something difficult. "Are you going to leave us?" Amara's heart stopped. "What? No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "Because you're important now," Emma said, her voice small and scared. "Daddy said you have a big job, and important people don't take care of kids. They have other people do that." Amara set down the book she'd been reading and pulled Emma into her lap, holding her close enough to feel the rapid flutter of her heartbeat. "Listen to me very carefully, Emma Hays. I am never ever leaving you, do you understand? Never. My job changed, yes, but you know what didn't change? The fact that you and Lucas are the most important people in my world. The fact that I love you both more than anything. The fact that I would do anything to keep you safe and happy. Even kill bad guys," Emma whispered. Amara froze. "What do you know about that?" "I heard Daddy talking to someone on the phone. He said you killed the men who took us. He said you saved our lives." Emma pulled back to look at Amara with eyes that were far too old for a 7-year-old. "I remember some of it, Mara. I remember being scared. I remember the loud noises. I remember you holding me and Lucas and telling us not to look. I remember feeling safe even though everything was scary." "Oh, sweetheart." Amara felt tears burning in her eyes. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from being scared." "But you did protect us," Emma said with the simple certainty of childhood. "You made the bad men go away. You kept us safe. And now you're going to keep other kids safe too, right? That's what your new job is." "Yes," Amara said, because there was no point in lying to this child who had already seen too much truth. "That's exactly what my new job is." "Good," Emma said, snuggling back against Amara's chest. "Because there are a lot of kids who need someone like you. But you're ours first, okay? You're our Mara first, and then you're everyone else's superhero." "Deal," Amara whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of Emma's head. "I'm your Mara first, always." The trap closed on a Thursday afternoon during what was supposed to be the final merger signing ceremony. Catherine had arranged everything perfectly. A conference room at a neutral location, lawyers from both sides, documents ready for signature. David Zhao had flown in from Hong Kong specifically for the occasion. Champagne was chilling. Photographers were positioned to capture the historic moment when Hays Global Industries expanded into the Asian market. Amara watched it all from a security station 2 floors below, surrounded by FBI agents and federal prosecutors, monitoring every camera angle, every microphone, every piece of evidence being gathered in real time. "She's good," said Agent Rebecca Torres, the lead investigator on the case. "Look at her face, not a hint of nervousness. She actually believes she's about to pull this off. She's had practice," Amara said, watching Catherine smile and shake hands and play the role of the brilliant executive facilitating a major business deal. This isn't her first time betraying someone's trust. It's just the first time she's been caught. On the monitors, Jonathan entered the conference room. He looked calm, composed, every inch the successful CEO about to make a smart business move. He greeted David Zhao warmly, complimented Catherine on her excellent work, and sat down at the table with the documents spread before him. "Mr. Hays," David Zhao said in accented but perfect English, "this is a momentous occasion. Our 2 companies together will reshape the manufacturing landscape of Southeast Asia. Your vision combined with our infrastructure, it's a partnership that will benefit everyone involved." "I certainly hope so," Jonathan said pleasantly, picking up a pen. "Before I sign, though, I'd like to introduce someone. Catherine, would you mind asking our Director of Corporate Security to join us? I'd like her to review the final documents one more time. Just a formality, you understand." Catherine's smile didn't waver, but Amara saw the tiny flicker in her eyes, a moment of calculation, of concern quickly suppressed. "Of course, though I'm not sure it's necessary. Our legal team has reviewed everything thoroughly." "Humor me," Jonathan said. "I've learned to value Amara's opinion on these matters. She has a way of seeing things that others miss." Amara stood, straightening her suit jacket. "That's my cue. Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," Agent Torres said. "You need a camera crew. This is going to be legendary." Amara took the elevator up 2 floors, her heart rate steady, her mind clear. This was familiar territory, the moment before confrontation, the calm before the storm. She'd done this dozens of times in her previous life, walking into rooms where people wanted her dead, where one wrong word or gesture could end everything. This was easier. This was just exposing the truth. She entered the conference room with a tablet in her hand and a smile on her face. "Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Hayes asked me to do a final security review before the signing." "Of course," David Zhao said, though his smile had become slightly fixed. "Though I must say this seems unusual. Are there security concerns with this merger?" "Just standard protocol," Amara assured him, moving to stand behind Jonathan's chair. "Mr. Hayes has become very cautious about major business decisions. Can't imagine why." The barb hit its mark. Catherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Now," Amara continued, pulling up files on her tablet, "I've been reviewing the due diligence reports on Zhao Corporation's facilities. Fascinating reading." "Catherine, you did the site visits personally, didn't you?" "I did," Catherine said smoothly. "Everything was in order. The facilities are state-of-the-art." "State-of-the-art," Amara repeated. "That's interesting because according to these inspection reports from the Vietnamese Ministry of Labor, the facility in Ho Chi Minh City has been cited for safety violations 17 times in the past 2 years. Workers have been hospitalized for chemical exposure. There was a fire last year that killed 3 people. The government is considering shutting it down entirely." The room went very quiet. David Zhao's face had lost several shades of color. Catherine's hands, resting on the table, had curled into fists. "I don't know where you're getting your information," Catherine said, her voice still controlled but with an edge now. "But those reports are clearly outdated or inaccurate. I was at that facility myself. It's perfectly safe." "Were you?" Amara pulled up a photo on her tablet and turned it so everyone could see. "Because this is you at the Hong Kong Mandarin Oriental on the same day you were supposedly touring the Ho Chi Minh City facility. That's David Zhao sitting across from you, and that's a briefcase being passed under the table. Would you like to explain what was in that briefcase, Catherine?" "This is absurd," Catherine said, standing abruptly. "I don't have to listen to these accusations. Jonathan, your new security director is clearly overstepping her bounds. This is a business meeting, not an interrogation." "Sit down, Catherine." Jonathan's voice was ice. "We're not done yet." "Actually," said Agent Torres, entering the room with 3 other FBI agents, "we're very much done. Catherine Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. David Zhao, you're being detained pending extradition proceedings. Gentlemen, if you'd both stand and place your hands behind your backs, this will go much more smoothly." The room exploded into chaos. Catherine tried to run, but Amara was faster, blocking the door, her body language making it clear that attempting to get past her would be a very bad idea. David Zhao started shouting in Mandarin, demanding lawyers, threatening lawsuits. The other lawyers in the room scrambled to distance themselves from their clients, pulling out phones and making frantic calls. Through it all, Jonathan sat calmly at the table, watching as the woman who had tried to destroy his company was handcuffed and read her rights. When Catherine was being led past him toward the door, she stopped, turning to look at him with pure hatred in her eyes. "You self-righteous bastard," she hissed. "You think you're so much better than the rest of us. You think your money makes you noble, but you're just another rich man playing games with people's lives." "You're right," Jonathan said quietly. "I am rich, and I do play games with people's lives. I employ 15,000 people whose livelihoods depend on the decisions I make. I take that responsibility seriously. You tried to destroy those 15,000 livelihoods for a $3 million payoff. So no, Catherine, I don't think I'm better than you." "I know I am." Catherine spat at him, but Agent Torres pulled her away before the spittle could land. "Let's go, Ms. Vance. You can save the dramatic speeches for your trial." As the room cleared, Jonathan and Amara stood alone among the scattered documents and abandoned champagne glasses. The photographers who had been meant to capture a historic merger had instead captured a historic arrest. The story would be all over the financial news within hours. "How do you feel?" Amara asked. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the place where Catherine had been standing. "Tired," he finally said. "Angry, betrayed, grateful that you caught this before it was too late. Terrified about what else I might have missed." You didn't miss anything else, Amara said. I've been through every file, every contract, every relationship. The company is clean now. Marcus and Catherine were the rot. We cut it out. We, Jonathan repeated, turning to look at her. You keep saying we, but this was all you, Amara. You built the case, you set the trap, you saved the company, just like you saved my children. I just sat in meetings and signed papers. You trusted me, Amara said. You gave me the authority and resources to do what needed to be done. You didn't second-guess me or demand that I explain every decision. You let me work. That's not nothing, Jonathan, that's everything. He moved closer, and for a moment Amara thought he might hug her. But he stopped just short, maintaining the professional distance that they'd both been careful to preserve. The foundation, he said, the one you wanted to create for families who've been through trauma. I've been working on it. I have lawyers drafting the paperwork. I want to announce it at the next board meeting. I want the world to know that Hays Global Industries isn't just about profit. It's about protection. It's about using our resources to help people who need help. What are you going to call it? Amara asked. The Clark Foundation, Jonathan said, named after the woman who taught me that strength isn't about power or money or position. It's about standing between the people you love and the darkness that wants to hurt them. It's about making impossible choices and living with the consequences. It's about being brave enough to care when caring is dangerous. Amara felt her throat close up. Jonathan, it's already done, he said gently. The paperwork is filed. The funding is allocated. The board approved it unanimously, well, unanimously minus the 2 members who are currently in FBI custody. The foundation will provide security services, trauma counseling, legal assistance, and financial support to families who've been victims of kidnapping, extortion, or violent crime, and you're going to run it. I'm already running corporate security, Amara protested. I can't do both. You can, Jonathan said. And you will, because nobody else can do what you do, Amara. Nobody else has your skills and your heart. Nobody else can be both the warrior and the healer. That's your gift. That's what makes you extraordinary. Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from the nanny who'd been covering for her while she was at the signing ceremony. Lucas fell at the park. Nothing serious, just scraped knees, but he's asking for you. Go, Jonathan said immediately, reading her expression. Emma and Lucas need you. That's always the priority. Amara didn't argue. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door, then paused, turning back. Thank you, she said, for seeing me, for trusting me, for giving me a chance to be more than I thought I could be. Thank you, Jonathan replied, for being exactly who you are. Amara found Lucas in the Brownstones' living room, sitting on the couch with bandaged knees and tear-stained cheeks. Emma was next to him, holding his hand and telling him a story about a brave knight who fell off his horse, but got back up and saved the kingdom anyway. Mara! Lucas launched himself at her the moment she walked through the door, and Amara caught him, holding him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the antiseptic from his bandages. I heard you had an adventure, she said, carrying him back to the couch and settling him in her lap. Tell me everything. I was on the monkey bars, Lucas said, his voice still shaky, and I was going really fast and I was almost to the end, and then I fell. And it hurt really bad, Mara. My knees were bleeding and everything. But you were so brave, Emma interjected. He didn't even cry that much, and he let the nanny clean the cuts even though it stung. That is brave, Amara agreed, examining the bandages with a practiced eye. These look like they're going to heal up just fine. You'll have cool scars to show your friends. Like your scars? Lucas asked, touching the faint line on Amara's forearm, a souvenir from a mission in Syria that had gone sideways. Just like my scars, Amara confirmed. Every scar tells a story about a time you survived something hard. Your scars will tell the story of the day you were brave enough to try the monkey bars, even though they were scary. Were you scared? Lucas asked. When you saved us from the bad men? Were you scared like I was scared on the monkey bars? Amara looked at this 5-year-old boy, at his wide eyes and his bandaged knees, and his absolute trust that she would tell him the truth. Yes, she said. I was terrified. I was more scared than I've ever been in my entire life, because I love you and Emma more than anything, and the thought of something bad happening to you made me feel like my heart was going to stop. But you saved us anyway, Lucas said, even though you were scared. That's what love does, Amara said. It makes you brave even when you're terrified. It makes you strong even when you feel weak. It makes you do impossible things because the alternative, losing the people you love, is unthinkable. I love you, Mara, Lucas said, snuggling against her chest. "You're my favorite person in the whole world. I love you too, buddy," Amara whispered, holding him close. "You and Emma both. You're my whole world." Emma climbed onto the couch on Amara's other side, creating a sandwich of warmth and trust and uncomplicated affection. "Tell us a story, Mara. Tell us about the brave knight who protected the kingdom." So Amara told them a story. Not about warehouses and gunfire and impossible shots in the darkness, not about boardrooms and betrayals and traps that closed on people who deserved to be caught. She told them about a knight who loved the kingdom so much that she would fight any dragon, climb any mountain, cross any ocean, to keep the people safe. She told them about how the knight wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful, but she was the bravest because she fought not for glory or gold but for love. And as she told the story, with Emma and Lucas warm and safe in her arms, Amara realized something profound. She'd spent 8 years as an intelligence operative, thinking that her purpose was to serve her country, to complete missions, to be the weapon that her government pointed at problems that needed solving. Then she'd lost everything and thought her purpose was gone, that she was just drifting, just surviving, just pretending to be normal, while the real her died a little more each day. But she'd been wrong about everything. Her purpose wasn't about missions or countries, or even about the job title that now sat on her office door. Her purpose was this: these 2 children who trusted her absolutely, who loved her unconditionally, who needed her to be both strong and gentle, both warrior and caregiver. Her purpose was standing between them and anything that might hurt them, whether that was kidnappers with guns or nightmares in the dark or scraped knees from monkey bars. Everything else, the corporate security position, the foundation, the power and resources that Jonathan had given her, all of that was just tools. Tools that would let her extend this protection to other families, other children, other people who needed someone to stand in the gap and say, "Not on my watch." The next board meeting was different from the last one. For one thing, there were 2 empty chairs where Marcus Whitmore and Catherine Vance had once sat. For another, Amara walked into the room not as an intruder or a surprise, but as a member of the board. Jonathan had insisted, and the remaining executives had agreed without argument. "Before we begin," Jonathan said, standing at the head of the table with Amara seated to his right, "I want to make an announcement. Hayes Global Industries has established the Clark Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing comprehensive support to families affected by kidnapping, extortion, and violent crime. The foundation will offer security services, trauma counseling, legal assistance, and financial support at no cost to families who need help. We're funding it with an initial endowment of $50 million, and we're committing to matching public donations dollar for dollar." He pulled up a presentation on the main screen, a logo, a mission statement, photos of the team that Amara had been quietly assembling over the past few weeks. Former FBI agents, trauma counselors, legal experts, security specialists, people who understood what it meant to be vulnerable and who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. "The foundation will be run by Amara Clark," Jonathan continued, "who will maintain her position as Director of Corporate Security while also serving as the foundation's Executive Director. She'll have complete operational authority and unlimited access to company resources, and she'll report directly to me and to this board on a quarterly basis." "This is quite ambitious," said one of the executives, a man named Richard Chen who had survived the purge of corruption and proven himself to be both competent and honest. "What's the expected return on investment?" "There isn't one," Jonathan said flatly. "This isn't about ROI. This is about doing what's right. This is about using our success to help people who are suffering. This is about building a legacy that matters more than quarterly earnings or stock prices." "With respect, Mr. Hayes," Richard said carefully, "shareholders might not see it that way. They might view this as a frivolous use of company resources. Then they can sell their shares," Jonathan replied. "I'm not interested in shareholders who only care about profit margins. I'm interested in building a company that stands for something, a company that my children can be proud of, a company that makes the world better, not just richer." He looked around the table, meeting each executive's eyes in turn. 6 months ago, someone tried to destroy my family. They failed because one extraordinary woman refused to let it happen, but there are thousands of families out there who don't have an Amara Clark protecting them, families who are vulnerable and scared and desperate. The Clark Foundation is going to change that. We're going to be the protection that they need, and if anyone in this room has a problem with that, there's the door. Nobody moved toward the door. Instead, slowly, Richard Chen started clapping. Then another executive joined in, then another. Within seconds, the entire boardroom was applauding, and Amara felt her face flush with embarrassment and pride, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Thank you," she said when the applause finally died down. "I promise you won't regret this. The foundation will save lives. It will give families a chance to heal. It will make sure that what happened to the Hayes family doesn't happen to others, or if it does, that they have the resources and support to survive it." The meeting continued with discussions of budgets and timelines and operational procedures, but Amara barely heard any of it. She was thinking about the families she would help, the children she would protect, the lives she would save. She was thinking about how she'd gone from being a weapon to being a shield, from taking lives to preserving them. That evening, after the meeting ended and the executives filed out, Jonathan stopped Amara at the door. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "Something I should have said weeks ago." Amara's heart skipped. "What is it?" "I'm sorry," Jonathan said, "for exposing your past in that boardroom, for making you relive the warehouse, for putting you in a position where you had to be vulnerable in front of strangers. I told myself it was necessary, that it was the only way to make them understand why you deserved that chair. But the truth is, I could have found another way. I could have protected your privacy, and I didn't because I was angry and I wanted them to know what you'd done for me. That was selfish, and I'm sorry." Amara stared at him, surprised by the apology, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Jonathan, I'm not angry about that. I was at first, maybe. But you were right, they needed to understand, and honestly, it was freeing in a weird way. I've spent so long hiding who I was, pretending to be just a nanny, just a normal person. Having it all out in the open, having people know the truth, it's terrifying, but it's also a relief." "Still," Jonathan said, "I should have asked your permission first. I should have given you a choice." "You gave me plenty of choices," Amara said. "And you gave me the choice to take the position or refuse it. You gave me the choice to run the foundation or walk away. You've given me more choices in the past few weeks than I've had in years. So thank you for all of it." Jonathan smiled, and it was the first truly relaxed smile she'd seen from him since the kidnapping. "Emma and Lucas are having dinner at my mother's tonight. She wanted to spoil them with homemade pasta and too much dessert. Which means I'm ordering Thai food and watching terrible action movies in my pajamas. Want to join me? We can critique the unrealistic fight scenes and mock the impossible physics." Amara laughed, surprised by the invitation, surprised by how much she wanted to accept it. "That sounds perfect. But I get to pick the first movie, and I'm warning you now, my standards for realistic action are very high. You're going to hear a lot of complaining." "I'm counting on it," Jonathan said. They ended up in Jonathan's private screening room, because of course he had a private screening room, with enough Thai food to feed a small army and a queue of action movies that ranged from classic to ridiculous. Amara spent 2 hours pointing out every tactical error, every impossible shot, every moment when the hero should have been dead 3 times over. Jonathan laughed until his sides hurt, asking questions, playing devil's advocate, defending the movies even when they were clearly indefensible. It was normal. It was easy. It was the first time since the warehouse that Amara had felt like she could just be herself, not the warrior, not the caregiver, not the director of anything. Just Amara, eating pad Thai and mocking Hollywood's complete misunderstanding of how actual combat works. "Okay, but seriously," Jonathan said during a particularly egregious scene where the hero survived a 50-foot fall onto concrete with nothing but a few photogenic scratches. "Have you ever done anything that crazy? Any impossible stunts that should have killed you but didn't?" Amara was quiet for a moment, thinking about Syria and Afghanistan and a dozen other places where she'd done things that should have been fatal. "Once," she finally said, "I had to jump from a 3rd-story window onto a moving truck. I broke 2 ribs and dislocated my shoulder, and I spent 3 days in a safe house being stitched up by a medic who was probably drunk. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done, and I swore I'd never do anything that reckless again." "But you did," Jonathan said softly. "In the warehouse. That shot you took, the one that passed 2 inches from Emma's ear, that was just as reckless. Maybe more so." "That was different," Amara said. "That wasn't about me, that was about saving your daughter. I would have taken a shot with half an inch of clearance if I had to. I would have done anything." "I know," Jonathan said. "That's what terrifies me. The idea that you would sacrifice yourself without hesitation. The idea that you see your life as less valuable than others." "It's not about value," Amara said. "It's about purpose. My purpose is protecting people." If that means putting myself in danger, then that's what I do. It's not complicated. It is to me, Jonathan said, because you matter, Amara. Not just because of what you can do or who you can protect. You matter because you're you. And the idea of losing you, of Emma and Lucas losing you, that's unacceptable. Amara didn't know what to say to that, so she just sat there, holding her container of pad thai, feeling the weight of Jonathan's words settle over her like a blanket. "Promise me something," Jonathan said. "Promise me that you'll be careful, that you won't throw your life away, that you'll remember that there are people who need you alive, not just as a protector, but as a person, as Mara." "I promise," Amara said, and she meant it. "I'll be careful. I'll come home. Always." The months that followed were a blur of activity. The Clark Foundation launched with a press conference that made national news. Amara hired staff, established protocols, created systems for identifying and helping families in crisis. The foundation's first case was a family in Detroit whose daughter had been kidnapped by her non-custodial father and taken across state lines. Amara's team located them within 48 hours, coordinated with local law enforcement, and brought the girl home safely. The mother's tears of gratitude, her repeated thank yous, her disbelief that someone had actually helped her, that became Amara's fuel. The second case was harder, a family in rural Montana whose son had been taken by a domestic terrorist group. The FBI was involved, but they were moving slowly, cautiously, worried about provoking a violent response. Amara didn't have time for caution. She went to Montana herself, assessed the situation, and coordinated a rescue operation that extracted the boy and 3 other hostages without a single shot being fired. The terrorist group was arrested, the hostages were safe, and Amara was back in New York in time to make Lucas's soccer game. By the end of the first year, the Clark Foundation had helped 47 families, 47 children who came home safe, 47 parents who got to hold their babies again, 47 stories that ended not in tragedy, but in relief and reunion, and the slow, difficult work of healing. And through it all, Amara remained Emma and Lucas's nanny. She made their breakfast. She braided Emma's hair. She helped Lucas with his math homework. She read them stories at night and held them when they had nightmares and taught them that being strong meant being gentle, that being brave meant being kind, that being powerful meant using that power to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. On the 1-year anniversary of the warehouse, Jonathan threw a small party, just family. His mother, his sister, Emma, Lucas, and Amara. They didn't talk about the kidnapping. They didn't rehash the trauma or the fear or the violence. Instead, they celebrated survival. They celebrated the fact that they were all still here, still together, still building a life that mattered. "Speech," Emma demanded, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "Mara has to give a speech." "I'm not good at speeches," Amara protested, but everyone was looking at her expectantly and she couldn't refuse. She stood, her own glass of wine trembling slightly in her hand. "A year ago," she said, "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I thought I was just going through the motions, just surviving, just waiting for something to give my life meaning again. And then 2 beautiful, brilliant, brave children reminded me what meaning actually looks like. It looks like scraped knees and bedtime stories. It looks like breakfast made with love and homework done with patience. It looks like standing between the people you love and anything that might hurt them, whether that's kidnappers or nightmares or just the ordinary cruelties of the world." She looked at Emma and Lucas, at their shining faces, at the absolute trust in their eyes. "You two saved me just as much as I saved you. You gave me a reason to be brave. You gave me a purpose that matters more than any mission I ever completed. You made me remember that the most important battles aren't fought with guns or strategy or tactics. They're fought with love and patience, and the willingness to show up every single day and do the small, ordinary things that make a life worth living. And you," she said, turning to Jonathan, "you gave me the tools to turn that love into something bigger. You gave me the resources to protect not just your family, but other families. You trusted me when you had no reason to. You saw me, really saw me, and you didn't flinch. You didn't try to make me smaller or safer or more acceptable. You just gave me space to be everything I am, the warrior and the caregiver, the protector and the nurturer. So thank you for all of it." She raised her glass. "To survival, to healing, to second chances, to families that are built not just by blood, but by choice and love and the willingness to stand together against the darkness." "To family," Jonathan echoed, and everyone clinked glasses, and Emma and Lucas cheered, and for a moment everything was perfect. That night, after the party ended and Emma and Lucas were asleep, Amara stood in the doorway of their rooms, watching them breathe. Emma was sprawled across her bed, her stuffed elephant clutched in one hand, her face peaceful in sleep. Lucas was curled into a tight ball, his blanket pulled up to his chin, his thumb dangerously close to his mouth in a habit he was supposed to be breaking. "They're lucky to have you," Jonathan said softly, appearing beside her in the hallway. "I'm lucky to have them," Amara replied. "They saved my life, Jonathan. They gave me a reason to be human again." "You were always human," Jonathan said. "You just forgot for a while, but they remembered for you. And now you're teaching them how to be strong and gentle at the same time, how to be brave and kind, how to use power to protect instead of to dominate. That's a gift, Amara. That's the most important thing anyone could teach them." Amara closed the door to the children's rooms gently, careful not to wake them. "I need to tell you something," she said. "The Foundation has been approached by the State Department. They want us to consult on international kidnapping cases. They want to use our resources and expertise to help American families whose children have been taken abroad. It's a huge opportunity, but it would mean more travel, more time away from Emma and Lucas, and I don't know if I can do that." "What do you want to do?" Jonathan asked. "I want to help those families," Amara said. "I want to bring those children home, but I also want to be here for Emma and Lucas. I want to make their breakfast and braid Emma's hair and help Lucas with his math. I don't want them to feel abandoned or less important." "They could never feel that," Jonathan said, "because you've shown them every single day that they're your priority. 1 or 2 trips a month, working with the State Department to save other children. That doesn't diminish what you are to Emma and Lucas. If anything, it shows them that love isn't finite, that caring about other people doesn't mean caring less about them. That being a hero means making hard choices and trusting that the people you love will understand." "You're saying I should do it," Amara said. "I'm saying you should do what your heart tells you to do," Jonathan replied. "And I'm saying that whatever you decide, Emma and Lucas and I will support you, because we're family, and family means standing together, even when things are hard." Amara looked at this man who had given her so much: trust, resources, authority, purpose. This man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and her most dangerous and had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it. I'll work with the State Department. I'll help bring those children home. But Emma and Lucas come first, always. If they need me, I'm on the next plane back. No exceptions." "No exceptions," Jonathan agreed. "That's the deal." They shook on it, and Amara felt something shift in her chest. A sense of rightness, of purpose, of being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The Clark Foundation's work with the State Department began 3 weeks later. Amara's first case took her to Mexico, where a 6-year-old American girl had been taken by her father after a custody dispute. The Mexican authorities were cooperative, but overwhelmed. Amara coordinated with local law enforcement, tracked the father to a small village outside Guadalajara, and negotiated the girl's return without violence. The mother's tears when she was reunited with her daughter made every hour of travel, every moment away from Emma and Lucas worth it. The second case was in the Philippines, the third was in Colombia, the fourth was in Thailand. Each one was different, each one was challenging, and each one ended with a child coming home safe. Amara became known in international law enforcement circles as the woman who could find anyone, who could negotiate anything, who could bring children home when everyone else had given up hope. But no matter where she went, or how long she was gone, she always came home to Emma and Lucas. She video-called them every night, reading bedtime stories over grainy internet connections from hotel rooms in foreign cities. She brought them souvenirs from every country, not expensive gifts, but small, meaningful things. A carved wooden elephant from Thailand, a woven bracelet from Colombia, a painted tile from Mexico, tokens that said, "I was thinking of you, I'm always thinking of you." And when she came home, she slipped back into their lives as seamlessly as if she'd never left, making breakfast, braiding hair, helping with homework, reading stories, being Mara, their Mara, the person who loved them more than anything in the world. 3 years after the warehouse, Emma turned 10 and Lucas turned 8. They threw a party in Central Park. Nothing fancy, just friends and family and too much cake. Amara watched Emma run with her friends, confident and happy and so far removed from the terrified 7-year-old who had been taken from her school. She watched Lucas climb on the jungle gym with fearless determination, the same jungle gym where he'd once been too scared to try. "They're okay," Jonathan said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "You did that. You made them okay." "We did that," Amara corrected. "You, me, your mother, your sister, everyone who loved them and showed them that the world could be safe again." "Fair enough," Jonathan said. "But you were the foundation. You were the one who stood between them and the darkness. You were the one who made them believe that they could be brave." Amara sipped her coffee, watching Emma and Lucas play, feeling a contentment that she'd never thought possible. "I got a call yesterday," she said, "from the director of the FBI. They want to create a specialized unit focused on child abduction cases. They want me to help design the training program, to teach agents how to think like kidnappers, how to anticipate their moves, how to bring children home safely. It's a huge honor, but it's also a huge commitment." "What did you tell them?" Jonathan asked. "I told them I'd think about it," Amara said. "I told them I needed to talk to my family first, because that's what you are, Jonathan. You and Emma and Lucas. You're my family, and I don't make big decisions without consulting my family." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, watching his children play. "Do you remember what I said to you in that boardroom 3 years ago, when I was trying to convince you to take the position?" "You said a lot of things," Amara replied. "I said that you're not just the nanny, that you're the reason my children still have a father and I still have my children, that everything exists because you made an impossible shot in a warehouse." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "I meant every word of that, but I was also wrong about something." "What were you wrong about?" Amara asked. "I was wrong to think that your value comes from what you did in that warehouse. Your value doesn't come from being a warrior or a protector or a hero. Your value comes from being you, from being the person who makes breakfast with love and braids hair with patience and reads bedtime stories with enthusiasm, from being the person who sees a child in danger and thinks, 'That's my kid,' even when it's not, from being the person who turns trauma into purpose and pain into protection." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. "So, if the FBI wants your help, give it to them. If the State Department needs you, go. If there are children out there who need saving, save them, because that's who you are. And Emma and Lucas and I will be here when you come home, proud of you, grateful for you, loving you exactly as you are." Amara felt tears burning in her eyes. "I love you guys too," she whispered. "You're my whole world." "We know," Jonathan said simply. "We've always known." Emma ran over then, breathless and laughing, her hair escaping from the braid that Amara had carefully created that morning. "Mara, come play with us. We're playing rescue. I'm the kidnapped princess and Lucas is the evil dragon, and we need you to be the hero who saves me." Amara laughed, setting down her coffee. "I'm always the hero." "Because you're the best at it," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You're the best at saving people. That's your job." "Actually," Amara said, chasing after Emma toward the playground, "my job is loving you. The saving people thing is just a bonus." And as she ran with Emma and Lucas, playing their game of rescue and heroism, Amara realized that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all those years ago when she'd left the DIA and answered Jonathan's job posting. She'd found a place where she belonged, a purpose that mattered, a family that loved her not despite who she was, but because of it. She was a warrior and a caregiver, a protector and a nurturer, a hero and a nanny. She was all of those things and none of those things. She was just Amara, and that was enough. That was everything. The sun set over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber and rose. Emma and Lucas played until they were exhausted, until their laughter turned to yawns and their running turned to stumbling. Amara carried Lucas home on her shoulders while Emma held her hand, both children chattering about their day, about their friends, about the cake that had been so good they'd each had 3 pieces. And Jonathan walked beside them, his hand occasionally brushing against Amara's, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone, that she never had to be alone again, that she had a family who would stand with her against anything the world threw at them. That night, after Emma and Lucas were asleep, after the party cleanup was done and the house was quiet, Amara sat in her office, the ridiculous office with the view of the Hudson and the exotic wood desk and the bookshelf full of children's stories. She pulled up her email and typed a response to the FBI director. "I would be honored to help design your training program. Child abduction cases require a specific mindset and skill set, and I believe I can provide valuable insights. However, I have conditions. First, I will consult remotely whenever possible, as I have family commitments that take priority. Second, Any in-person training sessions must be scheduled around my family's needs. Third, I reserve the right to decline cases or assignments if they conflict with my responsibilities to the people I love. If these conditions are acceptable, I'm ready to begin immediately. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she opened a new document and began writing, not a report or a training manual, but a letter. A letter to Emma and Lucas to be opened when they were older, when they could understand the full story of what had happened in that warehouse and what it had meant. Dear Emma and Lucas, by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand that the world is complicated and scary and beautiful all at once. You'll know that people are capable of terrible things and extraordinary things, sometimes in the same breath. You'll have learned that love is both the most fragile and the most powerful force in the universe. I want you to know that saving you in that warehouse wasn't heroic. It was inevitable. It was the only possible choice. Because you were my kids. You are my kids, and nobody hurts my kids. Not kidnappers, not nightmares, not the ordinary cruelties of the world. My job, my purpose, my entire reason for existing is to stand between you and anything that might harm you. But here's the secret that I hope you've already learned by the time you read this. You've saved me just as much as I saved you. You saved me from a life of shadows and violence and loneliness. You saved me from forgetting how to be human. You saved me from believing that my only value was in being a weapon. You taught me that strength can be gentle, that courage can be kind, that the most important battles aren't fought with guns, but with patience and love and the willingness to show up every single day and do the small, ordinary things that make a life worth living. Thank you for being my kids. Thank you for letting me be your Mara. Thank you for showing me that I could be both a warrior and a caregiver, both strong and soft, both powerful and gentle. I love you more than words can express, and I always will. Forever yours, Mara. She saved the letter in a secure file to be delivered to Emma and Lucas on their 18th birthdays. Then she closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and went to check on them one more time before bed. They were sleeping peacefully, Emma with her elephant, Lucas with his blanket. Amara stood in the doorway, watching them breathe, feeling a gratitude so profound it made her chest ache. She'd been just a nanny, just a woman with a complicated past and a simple present. Just someone trying to survive and maybe, if she was lucky, to help a couple of kids do the same. But Jonathan had refused to let her be just anything. He'd insisted that she sit at the head of the table. He'd forced the world to see her for everything she was, the warrior and the caregiver, the protector and the nurturer, the woman who had killed to save his children and who would build an empire to ensure no other child would ever have to be that scared. And in doing so, he'd given her the greatest gift anyone had ever given her, the permission to be fully herself, without apology or explanation or shame. She was Amara Clark. She was Mara. She was a hero and a nanny and everything in between. And she was exactly where she was supposed to be. End.